Hello, my dear friends, and thank you so much for tuning in to today's very special interview with Chris Shelton. Chris is someone who came into my life a few years ago at a time when I was really struggling with the guilt that was related to the role I played as a cult recruiter. The memories that came back to me of things that I said and did that I wouldn't want to say or do while under the dark cloud of mental manipulation that I think a lot of us have gone through, even people who don't realize they were in a cult, since this sort of mind control tactic has permeated our society in such a way that we see things like manipulation, gaslighting, belittlement of others, to the point that when someone knows something and they know it, often we can be held back from actualizing our full potential just because we're not able to accept that sometimes we have to push past other people's triggers in order to discover that we know what we know and we have the right to know it. And I think this is something people like Chris and I might be more comfortable with, I think, than the average individual who hasn't interacted with a lot of people from different abuse backgrounds. And what I've always enjoyed about Chris's approach is that rather than following sort of the dogmatic thinking methods that lead individuals into mental bondage, like, for example, you're doomed to repeat a vicious cycle forever and it's out of your control and you have to surrender to what other people tell you. Chris has always had that open-mindedness to explore and experiment rather than to just accept a negative reality at face value. And I really love that. So Chris, sorry for babbling on as I
No,
get.
that's great. Thank you. It was a wonderful intro.
Oh, good. I never know what
Yeah,
I'm
thank
going to
you
say
for
until
that.
it comes out, but I'm
Uh,
glad you like it.
no, absolutely. I'm all about, good critical thinking and emotional intelligence and letting people believe what they want. I don't care, who cares? It's not, your beliefs don't affect me unless you start trying to control me with them. And that's when I come into the picture and say no, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um,
So
and I've seen that again and again with people who have activated what I think, I don't know if you still call your channel this, but I think the critical thinker is what you went by when you.
yeah, I changed that cause I realized I was putting myself on a pedestal and
Oh,
inadvertently, I didn't really mean to, but people
yeah.
assume that about you when you call yourself that. And I was like, okay, well, I don't want people assuming I'm on some pedestal. My whole channel was about me learning and recovering from a cult. And believe me, I was the worst critical thinker on the planet, right? I mean, it was horrible. I was in Scientology for 27 years.
Yeah.
That's a ridiculous amount of time. And so what I was trying to do was get across that, in learning about critical thinking, I wanted to help teach it to other people along the way, just because I was learning stuff and I thought it was fun to pass it on. But I decided to just cut it back to my name. It'll be safer that way. My channel will just be Chris Shelton, so
Right? Because that's basically all we can really be absolutely sure about, right? Is I know my name, I
exactly.
know what I believe, I know what I feel responsible to do based on those beliefs, and that's it. And
Yeah,
um,
sure.
yeah, but I feel like the critical thinking that you initiated a lot of us into just by having thought processes introduced that we might not normally have come across
Right.
really did trigger a lot of wake ups for people. So even though it's wrong to see somebody on a pedestal and as a result of that feel like we have to become what we think they are or what we think they want
Right.
us to be, that the open dialogue that can come through is very, very helpful.
Big
um
time. Big time. I really can't push critical thinking enough. I mean, it's regardless of how good or bad I might be at it, and that's all up for opinion.
yeah,
I will it's absolutely a hill that I will die on, that good critical thinking is an absolutely essential life skill.
right. And it's sad that we don't have a curriculum in the schools set up to teach children to think critically. What we have instead is some sort of um manipulation mechanism that teaches kids to align with groupthink. And I think things like textbooks that have to be memorized for facts rather than analyzed for actions and reactions. So for example, like when we look at a history textbook, we're told who killed who, why they killed who they killed, who was right, based on people's opinions of present moment retrospect. And it's
Sure.
kind of
Yeah.
hard to have retrospect on something if you weren't the one involved in it.
Well, plus the fact that history is written by the victors, right? So
Exactly.
it's, you know, you have all this bias and all this stuff. And I love history. I'm a real big history guy, but I'm very, you know, you got to be cognizant of the pitfalls that are possible, you know, and the fact that just because you read a thing doesn't necessarily mean that thing happened exactly that way. There's lots
Right.
of sources, lots of ways to look at stuff. And I think the most important thing you just said is that we always look at it through this cultural lens of our current values and our current ideas. And we don't appreciate that the people then had a whole different set of ideas and problems and issues they were dealing with, that they didn't have the enlightenment, quote unquote,
Yeah.
we have. so
Yeah.
you know, we can look back and judge them, and fair enough, you know, when you're you know, trying to commit genocide or something, that's pretty
Right.
universally a bad thing to be doing.
Yeah.
But certain other things I think kind of can be looked at a little oddly, you know, and we sort of lose the appreciation of what history can teach us,
Absolutely.
you know.
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
feel like it would be nice to see, like I've often pondered why it is that the toxicity of brainwashing somebody isn't criminalized by the judiciary. And
Right.
you know, there's the historical case of Patty Hearst, who was kidnapped out of her own home, held at gunpoint,
Right.
locked in a closet, tortured, abused. And then
Yep.
when she was used sort of like a puppet by the people who caught her to rob a bank, she was convicted by the jury because of her physical actions. And I think if thought control, mind control, and those sorts of manipulations could be scientifically proven, then a jury would no longer have the gray area issue of trying to figure out whether somebody did something with a negative intention or whether somebody was being used by somebody with a negative intention to do their agenda. And
For
unfortunately,
sure.
yeah,
For sure.
yeah,
Yeah, coercive control is a powerful, you know, tool in the wrong hands, you know, in the hands of predators and things like that. And Patty Hearst is a good example of an extreme example of that, you know, taken to a point where there were physical, real world crimes committed. And it really does bring up the whole issue with her. I mean, since we, you know, kind of dived right into the deep end with that one.
yeah. I'm sorry, I go with the bang. I'll pick the biggest
Yeah,
example
right.
I
No,
can
for
think of,
sure.
and
It's a
just in case. Yeah,
it's no, it's only because of the nuance, because of the complications of it, because you have and this is a discussion in the X cult world, is the line between victim and victimizer, you know, and at what point are you, or should you be held responsible for, you know, criminal actions you may have engaged in, or activities that were, you know, maybe immoral or illegal, or how do we judge that for X members, and how do X members deal with that themselves? And here we are, you know, okay, fine, maybe a jury is or isn't going to convict you. That doesn't change the jury of your mind, right? Or what you have to go through to take responsibility for what you did.
hmm,
These are difficult points of recovery for people, and challenging, very challenging.
yeah. I think Leah Remini and Mike Rinder did a great job uh, introducing this concept to the world through Aftermath and
Yeah, sure.
the subsequent media storm of attention that was brought to cultic groups has done a lot of good for people to start having that critical thinking awakened so that they can maybe see how patterns in those groups have played out potentially in their own life, whether it's an abusive relationship or a narcissistic parent situation or
Yeah.
being bullied at school and seeing the other kids responding to something within that feels perhaps misled and confused, and that can kind of trigger others to start reacting to it. I think the Nexium case that we've been following and things like the Masterson trial have also opened our eyes to the fact that when we look only at the bare facts of reality rather than the underlying issues, the cause effect, the continuum of someone's consciousness, perhaps the influences they've taken in, um, it is a murky area, but one thing that your work has given me hope in is that it's not an unsolvable equation. I think
Right.
there is a way to figure out how to determine someone's level of criminality based on whether or not that individual is willing and able to see what they did that was wrong and why it was wrong, and to be able to push past that. I think a lot of people are in the fear that if they admit to themselves what they did while under that coercive control, and thank you, you said the words that I was trying to remember. I'm glad you brought that up. When somebody's under that coercive control, there's so much fear that the controllers have put into them to keep up the act that they've been told to play along with, that when they start to outgrow that coercive control, it can be very frightening. Like, you don't know who you're going to be on the other side of that. And for a
Yeah.
lot of people, if they think that on the other side of that, it's going to be, now I'll be misunderstood, or I'll be cast in the role of the bad guy. People are going to think that I'm terrible. And the flip side irony of that is that I find when people were involved in these things and did had that darkness in them, as in not the pure blackness of a womb, that good darkness, but the negativity that we've unfortunately had called darkness, even though that's not what it really is. When they start waking up out of it, the fear to face the reality of what they did, I think, holds a lot of people in the trap where even if they leave a cult, they still feel like the false identity the cult imposed on them is their waking reality.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. The lingering effects of a cult are permanent unless you do something very purposeful and meaningful for yourself to overcome the habits and thought patterns, and the indoctrination, you could say, of the cult. Every cult has something that they're trying to teach you, trying to get across to you, trying to lay over your personality with the cult identity. That's another way we've put it. And
yeah.
And however you want to think about it, there's a sort of a template or a sort of a pseudo, sort of personality that's sort of instilled or installed in you as a cult member, or as a person who is under the thrall of a predatory personality.
Yeah.
That people use various personality disorders to talk about this. You mentioned narcissism; it's certainly a factor. But I always fall back to predator because we avoid the DSM labels, and
Yeah. Predator is
but
the
it's
great word for it. Yeah.
it's a great word because it immediately communicates exactly what we're talking about: a human being who is preying on other human beings.
Right.
And that's really just the immoral, way of and it instantly brings to mind the immorality of it. It's like, wait a minute, they're what?
Yeah.
We're supposed to be living in a society where we're on a playing field and we're all kind of have equal opportunity in front of the law and all that. Yeah, no, predators don't think that way.
No.
Predators see you as potential victims of their, that they can take advantage of. And when you have a permanent or a long-term relationship with such a personality, whether it's a cult leader or a domestic abuser,
Mhm.
a teacher, a pastor,
Yeah.
somebody in authority in your life, you're going to find that they're going to have this negative, destructive influence on your life, no matter how you look at it. They are preying upon you,
Right.
but they have to fool you into the way it becomes long term is they have to somehow, some way fool you into thinking that what they're doing isn't predatory. It's for your own good.
Right.
Right, you need this is
That's
something you have to have in your life,
yeah.
and we fell for that, right? We go, yeah, absolutely. And then when you wake up, you eventually, and almost inevitably, most people, by far most people, do wake up from this at some point and realize what's going on, and they have to get away from that. But getting away from it isn't the end of the story,
Hmm.
because all those thought patterns, all those ways that they taught you that you still deserved all that or needed all that, or this was something that you pulled in or whatever,
Mhm.
that sticks with you after you leave the predator behind. And you can still act the same way you did as a cult member outside of the cult situation. And that's when things get really weird.
Yes.
People look at you funny, you feel weird, you're acting all strange.
Yeah.
So, there can be trauma, there can be triggers, there can be, PTSD, there can be complex PTSD, there can be actual psychological conditions as a result of this.
Mm.
And so I think it's proactive. I think it's really responsible for I think it's on us as cult survivors to take the reins of our recovery, to take charge of it and navigate our way through. And that's education, and that's facing these tough questions, and it's looking at what we did, it's looking at what was done to us, and then looking at what we did, kind of in that order.
Yes,
You know, and I think these are the elements of recovery, you know.
absolutely. I know that's how it worked in my own journey.
Mm.
And I think the terminology that you've used, the predatory or the predator, who doesn't engage in the social interaction with the goal of a mutual exchange or a beneficial exchange, either, when there's somebody who's coming from a place of goodness, I find that individual, even if they want something from somebody else, they don't wish it to be against that other individual's will. Um,
Right.
so I could say, hey, I would really love for somebody to explain to me how we can fix the problems in the education system. That would be great. But I'm not going to go up to all the principals in the world and say, I'm going to crush your skulls unless you do things differently. Right. But I think predators don't care how their victims feel. They want what they want and they'll take it with or without permission. And unfortunately, the manipulation that we see these predators do convinces the victims on some level that there is a mutuality in that exchange, or that there is some sort of give and take involved. And then the religious structures we've been conditioned to believe in put dark programming into us that says, maybe this is my karma, maybe I deserve this, maybe God wills for me to be doing something and I don't know what I should be doing, but that person seems to be very confident, I'll follow them. And there you get the charismatic manipulator.
That's
And
right.
yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like one thing that you've said today, Chris, that helps me understand the dynamics of recovery is that if we think of a cult leader as being a narcissist or a psychopath or a sociopath, there will be some level on which we want to heal that person. But if we understand that that individual is a predator and not interested in being better because they don't think that what's in them is a bad thing, they just want to destroy and destroy and destroy and make people do their bidding.
Yeah.
That's when we can understand where the head needs to be cut off of the monster. And by that, I mean, if somebody in your life constantly makes you feel less than what you are, tells you that you're not good, tells you that you're less capable, and makes you feel like you have to do what they want you to do, and to your own detriment and to their, benefit, that's a predator.
Big
Um,
time. Big time. And it's a tough, and it's always, it's hard to generalize these things. It's always so context specific, I say, right? It always depends on the circumstances.
yeah,
Um, it's hard to have blanket statements with this because predators also say very similar words, right? They're
exactly.
coddling up to you, and they're your guru, they're your god, they're your authority figure. And well, I'm just here for your good. And so, your mother clearly, has issues with me and with this whole thing. And so really you might want to review that relationship with your mom, right?
Right.
And so they use all this stuff in a very, very twisty way.
Mhm.
um the concept of having boundaries is very important for us. It's something most ex-cult survivors have to learn about or relearn about, because cults and predators tear down your boundaries,
Absolutely.
uh, right? Very
Yeah.
purposefully. So when we struggle with these issues of, well, should I stay connected? Should I try to do something? Should I, just get this person out of my life? It's often a big struggle to figure out, am I doing this right, or am I doing this wrong or not? Um, it always depends on the circumstances, but I think we come down to those situations where, whether this is a good person or a bad person, if they're having a bad influence on your life right now, take a break. It's okay. You can
Exactly.
always circle back
Exactly.
around, you
Yeah.
know, you can
And
always circle back around.
we can always circle back around. And like you said, take a break and put up a boundary. And I think that we have been conditioned to feel like it's selfish to want to have a boundary up to protect us,
Yeah.
or that we are somehow taking something away from somebody else if we feel that they want one thing from us and we want another thing for ourselves. That martyrdom that a lot of us put ourselves into because that's what we've been taught is good, even though we're not meant to sacrifice our individuality, our likes and dislikes, our personality for somebody else's overrule, which is wrong.
Mhm.
Um,
Right. That's
and
exactly right. It can happen in any kind of relationship. That's why, just kind of learning healthy boundaries. And also, this is another thing that's a challenge for a lot of people. I've found it's not a challenge for me particularly, which is why I didn't notice it for a long time with
yeah.
other people. Because I'm just blah, 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 blah. I'm always talking. Is
Mm,
some people have a hard time actually saying what their boundaries are or putting them out there for people. They have a concept of it. They go, well, I don't really like to be talked to this way, but
yeah.
they have a hard time asserting themselves. And it's hard to be in a situation where you want to respect somebody's boundaries, but they're not necessarily letting you know what they are. And so
Right.
that's the conversation. These are things that are okay to talk about. Is I guess is where I'm trying to go with this.
Yeah.
Is we need to be able to receive, to hear and say, both ends. We have to give and receive on this topic. And I think it'll help clarify a lot of things for a lot of people if they have these kind of conversations with their friends, their family, their connections, and
Yeah.
it'll be easier for them in doing that to then recognize when somebody's you know really trying to stomp on their boundaries or
Exactly.
really trying to impose themselves, because they won't have that conversation. It'll just be my way or the highway.
Absolutely. Or even
Right.
worse, they'll pretend that they're interested in having the conversation and they'll try to use it to manipulate or to gaslight or to twist your things against you. And
That's
the
right.
difference between conversation and a dictatorial interaction where somebody is literally not hearing you, just taking your words and using them against you. That's a good way to identify, I think, a predatory individual versus somebody who maybe they have good intentions, but they don't have their own boundaries straight. So they don't know, they don't respect other people's because nobody respects theirs because they've never thought of it before. And so
Absolutely.
on walking around,
Absolutely.
people treat me like shit. Stop treating me like shit. I'm treating people like shit. So you'll get what you get.
Exactly. Exactly. So
But
it can be a nuanced thing, right? But I think we can always err on the side of, okay, let's have the discussion rather than assuming or thinking things. They're thinking somebody's going to understand you or thinking somebody's already knows. You'd be
yeah.
surprised, you open up your mouth and you're like, hey man, I didn't really think this is okay. And they're like, really? And you're
Yeah.
like, didn't you know? And they're like, no, I didn't know, right? And suddenly you're having the conversation, and and
Yeah.
you can sort stuff, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's really incumbent on us to know and set those for ourselves in
Yeah.
our life, and it will. Like we said, it'll make the predators more obvious.
Absolutely. And I think it's also an interesting observation that you make that a lot of us, when we finally voice out loud what we're feeling towards somebody and they're shocked and they had no idea that that's what we were feeling, a lot of us have such a strong sense of connection with other people. And it's referred to as being empathic. I feel that
Mm-hmm.
every real person has empathy. If you don't feel empathy for others, you're not a good person, you're a predator. And
Right.
that empathy can be displayed in someone's response when they finally do understand where you're coming from. So if you're dealing with somebody and you say, the reason I lashed out at you, for example, or the reason I said this thing that triggered you and bothered you, it's not because I want to hurt you, it's because I feel my basic human right to self-discovery or to defining my own identity is being impinged upon by your conditional response to who you think I should be. And if somebody says, well, fuck you, you should be what I want you to be, then that person's a predator. Or if they
Well,
say,
yeah.
you have no right to say that because I feel that you are that other thing. And so it's mean of you to tell me that you're not that. Bless you. But, or I should say, you are so good looking. I think that's what Jerry Seinfeld might prefer. I don't know if you're a Seinfeld viewer, but
I hadn't heard that. That's funny.
You haven't heard that? Oh, there's an episode where they decide that they don't believe in blessings, and so they don't want to be blessed. And Elaine said, "How about this? How about if somebody sneezes, you say, 'You are so good looking.'" That makes somebody happy after a sneeze, as opposed to that stupid religious thing that your soul's trying to escape. Like, no.
Absolutely. I'm down. I'm
Yeah.
down. Yeah, it's a tricky thing. Because it's so context specific dealing with these predatory type people, you know. All you can do is navigate it the best way you know how. But but like you said earlier, right? If you understand gaslighting, like for real, like not how it's used on social media. I mean, if you go look these words up and actually kind of understand that this is a repeating pattern of intentional behavior to mess with your sense of reality and your sense of yourself. Things like that, right? That's what gaslighting is really about. It's not just somebody lying to you, and that's how it tends to be. You know, not here. I'm just saying, out in the social media world, people misuse this stuff. But if you learn about it and you learn, you know, how you can recognize it, what the red flags of these kind of personalities are, oh boy, it really helps you. It really helps set yourself up so that you don't fall for it again. Because this is also part of, if you fell for something, and we all do. Let's be honest, we all do.
We all do. If you're in a human body, you have fallen for something at some point. Yeah, and it's
You
okay.
bet you have.
Yeah,
that's right. And if we have, then only by learning what our own weaknesses were, or our own whatevers were that led us to that. And I don't mean weaknesses, I mean more, what are our emotional needs? What is it that drives us, right? What is it that makes us want to do things? Us personally, as an individual, not just, you know, you, me, everybody else. What are my motivations? What drives me? If you can understand that about yourself, you are going to have a suit of armor around yourself as far as other people being able to manipulate you, because you're going to notice right away when they're saying stuff that's manipulative, right? Oh, you're so smart. You're so good. Oh, I just can't get enough of being around you. You're just like, wait a minute, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
You know?
Because people often say those words, but at the end of an interaction, you feel like you've been reduced. And you know, in the new age community, they have a term called energy vampire that kind of represents the same thing you described as a predator. You know, the kind of person that when you're around them, no matter how you're feeling, they try to spin the conversation in a downer direction. We're doomed. This planet is plagued. People are awful. You suck. I suck. Everybody sucks. Everything sucks. Well, if somebody says you suck, that person is sucking the life out of you, right? Because that's what suckers do. So when you have
I've used the same term, but I think I've called him a social vampire.
A social vampire. Well, there you go. So you're a little bit more new age than you thought you were.
Yeah, right. That's right. Well, I love
We're
vampires. So.
Yeah. It's interesting.
But it's true. It's such a great metaphor, such a great analogy, whatever, for what these people are doing, because they can't, because it is codependency. I mean, let's also recognize that they can't do what they're doing without you.
Right. Exactly.
You know, they need you as much as you need them, or as much as they make it look like and make you believe you need them.
Yes. And that's a key point too, because as soon as somebody says to you, when you tell them you are ready to break free from whatever bondage they have you in, if they say you're not ready, you need me, what they're really saying is, I need you, and I'm not letting you leave because I feel like I own you. And as soon as you feel that you're owned by somebody else or possessed by anyone other than your own independent spirit, you are under a negative influence. That's a predator, and it's someone you have to either escape physically from or separate yourself mentally, emotionally from if you've already escaped. And that's where the healing process comes in after cultic abuse or after something. A point that you brought up that I think a lot of people might benefit from is that when we were discussing boundaries and the implementation or the establishment of personal boundaries, the way to safeguard yourself against that toxic predatorial manipulation is by having a clear purpose for yourself. And that's something that I don't usually hear people talk about when it comes to cult recovery. Usually it's
Mm,
about how to clear away the fraudulent false purpose that we were fed and made to believe is our purpose. But
mm.
um, I'd be curious to know, in your experience or in your observation and your dealings with people, how an individual can tap into, like, what would you say to somebody if they said, I don't know what my purpose is? How do
Oh,
I
totally.
what I'm here for? I don't know what I
Yeah.
want to do or what I like. I'm wondering if there are steps someone can take to discovering their calling, or or at the very least, their reason for being here beyond other.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's something that is for my point of view, I think it's something that's self-generated.
Yeah,
And I think that excuse me.
certainly.
I mentioned emotional needs earlier, and I circle back around to those all the time because they really help me understand where people are coming from and how to think about different personalities. We're all different. Every single one of us are so wildly different. And yet there are categories of needs that we have within us that are the same from one to the next, even though how much of these needs we need is different from one person
Yeah.
to the other. For example, a need for community.
Mm.
This is something we all have, every person. This is why, Castaway is a movie that we all go, oh, because being alone sucks.
Yes, we'll
It's like
even take
COVID
our
drove all of us
volleyball and turn
nuts,
it into a
right?
friend if we have to, right?
Yeah, like we go a little nuts, and I think we all on the world stage all got a real heavy dose of that over the last few years
Yeah,
at just how at how crazy making isolation can be.
right.
Community is important, and not just community on Zoom, but community actually touching and feeling and being around other people. That's a thing for some of us. It's a lot more of a thing than for others of us, but
Mhm.
I believe it's a universal human emotional need for community.
Absolutely.
And right, and that's something that, to the degree you're not fulfilling it, you're not experiencing whatever, however much or little you need of it, if that bucket isn't full for you or isn't being filled, you're going to feel that there's some part of your life, some part of your personality, some part of your existence that just isn't cutting it, that just you're just not happy, you're just not satisfied, you feel unfulfilled. And I think the same thing applies across a couple other categories of emotional needs. One of them is purpose or meaning. Having a sense of identity, a sense of yourself, that you exist as an individual. So there's the community need, but there's also the I am myself. I have selfishness. I have an ego. I have my own sense of privacy. This is very important to people. This is what cults break down, what predators are breaking down all the time when we talked about boundaries, is they're tearing apart your emotional need for your sense of self and privacy.
Mhm.
Um, and when it comes to finding or figuring out purpose or meaning for ourselves, I think it's understanding ourselves at this level
Mhm.
that enables us to then go, okay, well, what does fill my buckets? What is the things that make my life meaningful to me? Because it's going to be different for you than it's going to be for me, right? For
Absolutely.
me, having a sense of helping other people and being useful in the community and being somebody who other people can rely on, and I can be somebody who can directly one-on-one assist people. These are important defining things for me as a person. These are the things that give me a sense of meaning, that my life has value. Other people are going to find value in other ways. I
Yeah.
mean, professional athletes find it through excellence in physical activity
Right.
and showing that off, right? And competition and beating other people in a
Yeah.
in a competitive sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Lots of different ways that we can find that meaning for ourselves.
Mhm.
But I'll tell you, if you don't figure these things out, there's a consequence here of, if we don't know these things about ourselves or take the time to figure it out, somebody else is going to be more than happy to come along and feed you one. Oh, I'll
Absolutely.
tell you your purpose. It's to save
Yeah.
the world,
Yeah.
and here's the Sea Org contract for 1 billion years,
Right.
and sign right here, and we'll go take care of Xenu. and
Yeah.
we'll take care of this planet and, plant the Scientology flag.
Right.
That's what gave my life meaning for decades. And
Yeah.
it was somebody else's purpose. It was L. Ron
Yeah.
Hubbard's purpose. It wasn't mine.
No. Well, and even beyond that, his purpose was never to save the world. His purpose was to enslave people with
Exactly. So that's the manipulation, right?
right.
And that
It's
was
like, okay,
crazy town.
if we
Oh, it was
say
all
that we're doing this to save the world, then all the people who want to save the world are going to jump in, and then the world's fucked because they're all here getting distracted doing this. Ha ha ha. That's what I kind of see all
exactly.
cult as being, right?
So,
Because I've seen it in Nityananda, Vishwananda, Hubbard, Raniere, um, Epstein,
all of them.
Weinstein, all of the people who
Right.
are doing things in order to get what they want and also see other people suffer. Because I feel like a predator will never have any idea of fair contribution to somebody else's reality. And
Right.
so when we feel like I don't mind if somebody takes this thing from me because I don't need it anyway, a predator might come along and say, I want that thing. You'll say, okay, you can take it. That might be, a religious leader coming up saying, could you do an hour of volunteering at my church? And they'll say, okay, I could do
Sure.
that. Because you're open, you have time to spend doing good things. But once a predator gets their foot in the door that way, they'll start to ask for more and more and more. So today it might be 1 hour volunteering. Tomorrow it's
Right.
2 hours plus a church service. And then the next day it's, now you get told what it is that you're really there for. So, somebody gets invited in as a volunteer, and then shortly thereafter, that volunteering turns into what turns out to be a contract of beliefs. So I don't have a problem with going into a building and scrubbing the floor if that's what they want us to do, to volunteer to help with their infrastructure. But the moment that they say you're scrubbing the floor because you're a sinner and God is better than you and you are negative and we have to do this to please the Lord, that's when it becomes a negative issue. And that's how you can tell which systems on this planet were set up to keep us in bondage and to keep us trapped. And I think, biblically, not that I like to quote the Bible because that has been used as a tool against a lot of us in a lot of ways. But it is kind of explained that, if you are vulnerable, and a lot of people feel guilt over their vulnerability because they'll equate that with gullibility. If you're vulnerable and you're not singularly focused on your goal, you will be swayed and dissuaded into doing worldly things that are negative for yourself, for others, for the environment, for consciousness in general. Because the way I like to see it, the way you described purpose-driven existence having a relation to finding what you want for yourself, the moment you're under somebody else's control, everything they do to you will be negating that. And this
Right.
is something I recently interviewed a lovely young lady who escaped Vishwananda. And she had a story about a time when they were starving, they were broke, the organization wasn't using its money to feed people, just to get rich for the family of the cult leader. And this lady's mother brought her a bag of apples because she knew that her daughter wasn't getting food there. The leader stormed in and said, who do you think you are to have apples? How dare your mother bring you food? You have to take this to the community room and give it to everybody, and wouldn't let her eat one of them because she had them in her room, not the communal
Wow.
area. And a lot of times people like myself, who I'm very introverted, I find I get somewhat in the past, I haven't really tried this lately, but I've been overwhelmed if I'm around people who each want something from me. And that's because my boundaries were very, very open. Um, Having the right to decide that we have personal space and personal time and personal projects is very good. And if somebody comes up to us and says something like, that thing that you're doing that you love to do, that thing is stupid. That's what kills somebody's conscious drive to do the good thing.
Yeah.
I remember, and it's not just cults, it's also schools that do this. Like there was a day in grade 10 when I got every answer correct on a math exam, But yet my teacher failed me and accused me of cheating because the formulas that I was spontaneously coming up with were different than the ones in the textbooks. And so I always thought, I'm bad at math. I'm not going to bother looking at physics. I'm not going to bother looking at anything scientific. Why bother? I'm going to fail anyway, because that's what I was taught in school. And so I think a lot of us feel very limited because even if we know we're capable of doing something, society around us is telling us not to because they don't see that potential. And so for an individual to bypass the circuitry or the neural pathways inscribed in the brain that tell them do what you're told, when somebody can go past that and figure out what they want to do, not necessarily what they've been told they are capable of doing, that's when a quantum leap can take place. And a eureka moment or serendipity, like, you know, if that dude hadn't taken that bath, he wouldn't have realized that the body in water is a great way to measure the water level, right? Like we all have to kind of tune into our natural intelligence and pay attention in our lives. And when we're constantly flooded with other people's negative ideas about ourselves, there's no clarity or silence in the inner space in which to have those kinds of eureka moments, right?
Yeah, true that. That's absolutely true. I mean, I think you're describing the difference between some, you know, a more, dare I say, a more mindful, you know, existence versus, you know, a dictated existence or an invalidated existence, you know. You certainly don't need, you know, that kind of negative influence on your life or that kind of negative person in your life constantly, you know, deriding you. Life is challenging enough. It's never going to be a cakewalk, and there's always going to be people opposed to what you want to do, not necessarily because they're evil, that just got other plans.
Yeah.
But then you run into the predators, and those guys are the guys who really seem to target you as an individual. And that's where, again, there's red flags of both of these things, and you can learn to spot these and navigate them so that these predators don't, you know, glom on and start sucking all the life out of you, you know?
Right, right. Because their world was a vampire, it's true. Like there were all kinds of cultic systems, political systems, media systems, education systems is what I'd call it. Lauryn Hill, I get that from her, I think. So there's all kinds of miseducation going on in this world.
Well, there is. It's true. There is.
When I was a teenager, I didn't think I had the right to say to my teacher, this is correct math. Well, I did. I tried. I said, this is correct math. Let me show you how I came to my conclusions. And the moment that teacher said, I don't care, it doesn't match what's in the book, that means you're wrong and you failed. That was a predator taking something away from me, because for years and years and years, my curious enthusiasm about maybe one day understanding how mathematics works was killed temporarily.
No, fair enough. Fair enough.
How would you recommend an individual respond and establish a boundary? For example, if they feel somebody is being predatory towards anything in their life that they feel is making them shrink. So it's, for example, if I look back at that day in high school when that teacher gave me a failing mark on an exam that I got a good grade on, I could have sought a second opinion and gone to another math teacher and said, hey, what's up? You know,
that's right.
So-and-so over there called me a liar and said that I cheated, but I know I didn't. So could you look with me over how I came to these answers and help me explain myself? That might have been a better solution than just saying, fuck it, I don't give a shit about school anymore. I'm just going to do the bare minimum, pass, and then get out of here and move on with my life.
That's
I think a lot of kids need people around them who can be champions for their truth when the other grown-ups might not recognize it or might not appreciate it. And I think that when we feel a predator is attacking us, it's hard to trust that other people are not also going to be predatory, right? Like, because
oh no, for sure. Just because, yeah, no, for sure. These are the challenges. These are huge challenges for every single human being. There's a balance of two things here, which are kind of opposed to one another or opposite ends of the spectrum, I guess. And this is where judgment enters in. I mean, Jesus, this is a real tough one, because because here's the thing, right? You're going to navigate life. You're going to run into people who are going to try to prey on you. That's absolutely a fact. There's no way around it. But you're also going to run into people who are just trying to help you, and you're going to disagree with them. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, which one is which, right? Now, and this is no
Right.
judgment on this story you just told. I haven't, I don't know
You
who this
weren't there.
lady
It's
is.
okay. Yeah.
Certainly wasn't cool that she flunked you for having right answers, and telling
Right.
you cheated is just off the damn rails. So
Right.
I'm not even talking about that, but in talking about navigating the world and dealing with these kind of predatory people, or dealing with people in life, there's two things, right? There's them and there's us.
Yeah.
And I think that I think the best rules for navigating this stuff or figuring this stuff out for ourselves involve, one, thinking outside the box might be an expression to describe what you did, right? Or what you suggested there, going to another teacher, going to get a second opinion, taking the time, investing in, having some self-respect and some certainty in yourself, and that you matter and that your answers matter. Good. That's a good, healthy thing. Here's the other side of that coin, is also with the critical thinking we talked about earlier. One of the key things about critical thinking is learning when to say there are two sets of three words that are hardest damn things for people to say or admit to, and can get us into all kinds of trouble. One of them is I don't know. That's three words that are just almost impossible for people to say these days.
Which is so ironic,
two,
because there's so many things we don't know. So there's no even not knowing what we don't know. Yeah.
That's right. And we don't know what we don't know, right? And so you don't know. And so you can kind of, think you need to know, and for social credit, or, because you don't want to be embarrassed in the moment or something like that. People have all kinds of reasons to not say I don't know. And sometimes it's dangerous to us to not know. You might get fired, or you might have this, or you might have that. It can look dangerous, right? So again, context matters, but being willing to say I don't know is really super important. Being able to say I was wrong is almost even more important.
Yes.
And that can happen too. And that's and I think a healthy degree of self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and critical thinking can help us figure out when is the right time to be saying these words to ourselves, or to eat a little humble pie, or go, hey, maybe I should reconsider my thinking here. That's the balance, right? Is when is it them and when is it us? And I think that if we're going to look at, a well-rounded answer to the question of how do we deal with these people in our lives, we have to be willing to acknowledge both ends of that.
Right.
I don't know if that's really long-winded, but that was kind of where
not at all. Not at all. It makes perfect sense to me. And in my life, the people who have confused me the most are the ones who are not able to simply say, I don't know. And I remember as a child asking questions to my elders about things I saw around me in the world. And if they didn't know, they would spontaneously bullshit. And then I started to spontaneously tell people bullshit, because I was always fed bullshit. And I had to be able to look within myself and say, where did this come from? I was wrong about that. And that's one thing you said, it's hard for people to admit. It's easy to admit what you were wrong about if you know that you weren't the source of the wrongness. If you know that somebody instilled that in you, maybe by mistake, maybe they were just being silly and you misinterpreted a joke. Like, hey, mom, my mom had a story when she was little. She asked my grandma where molasses comes from. And she said, it's the earwax of the giants. And then my mom never wanted to eat molasses again, because sometimes you'll spontaneously lie to a kid thinking it's just hilarious. But that poor kid will spend years and years and years not eating a food that they really enjoy, because
that's right.
Or my Auntie Lorraine, when I was little, I was serving myself some mushrooms in my grandma's kitchen, and she said, they grow those things in shit, right? And I just took them right back off my plate and put them back in the bowl. So sometimes, sometimes you have to just look within yourself and say, that was silly. I no longer want that to be a part of my inner reality.
That's right.
Unless you're able to say, I was wrong, you'll never be able to get rid of the wrongness. And that's how people kind of trap themselves in a guilt shame spiral, where they think, if I was really worthy of this, that, or the other, I wouldn't have been wrong about this, that, or the other. But being right all the time doesn't qualify an individual for a better future. Being willing to stay and observe when we're wrong and renegotiate or re-strategize, I think, is a better solution.
Absolutely. I really try when I'm not, and we always lead with the emotions, and it's hard. I get it. I
Yeah.
get it. I mean, believe me, I get it.
Yeah.
We don't want to be wrong. We don't want to be reduced in the eyes of our peers. We don't want to have a reputation hit. We don't want to feel like we're wrong. But I'll tell you, when you really, if you can kind of rise above that a little bit, it'll really serve you well, because it's the only way you ever learn anything new, is you admit to yourself you just don't know something, right? And it's
Yeah.
okay, because it opens the door to new learning, and
Exactly.
that's progress in life. That's the whole point. And the other thing is this idea of having to have other people agree with you all the time, right?
Right.
It's okay.
Yeah.
We have a lot of social pressures and obligations that we run on ourselves. Other
Mhm.
people aren't even running on us. We do it to ourselves sometimes.
It's true.
And
And
the
that's
only
what really
place that
hurts. Yeah.
what's that? Oh, I was going to say, the only place that everybody agrees
Yeah.
is in a cult.
It's true. It's true. It's true. So if you're looking around your life thinking, what's wrong with everybody? They're in a cult.
I mean, kind of, a little bit,
Yeah.
a little
Yeah.
bit.
It's true.
Right. I mean, it's, obviously you can take it too far, right? I mean, society is society. We need society. We get along better when we do society, but
Yeah.
it's a mixed bag, man, because people out there have all kinds of ideas and they're never going to agree with you. And yet you got to get along anyway. And how do you do that? And laws and rules and, courts and all this stuff. This is all the structure of doing it.
Yeah.
But when you get these kind of human sharks, swimming around in the waters here, just again preying on people, despite these systems, right? That the systems can be really good for us in a lot of ways, but these predatory people, especially when they get into a position of authority or power, they just turn it all upside down on us,
Yeah.
just like that.
It's true.
Those are the monkeys in the wrenches.
Yeah, absolutely. Good way to put it. The monkeys in the
Yeah.
rain. That's like tick tock, tick tock, says the wall and the clock. And that's the kind of outside the box thinking that I think helps us go from I was wrong, I don't know, into let's find out. And
That's
I
right.
think those are three words that have scared a lot of us, that let's find out, because the spirit of exploration has been very, very restricted in a global
Yeah.
system where we were under the rule of people who thought they knew better or who knew they didn't, but wanted us to believe that they knew better. But really,
Yeah, I could not agree more. Totally agree.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
it's
Because it always stagnates. There's always this thing about power is people who want to hold on to power have to somehow stop progress from happening. And
right.
it's this really weird thing. It doesn't have to be that way,
No,
but these predatory type leaders who want to own the power, own the people, you can tell right away, right? Because they start doing information control and behavior control and even emotion control. And they just dictate how everybody's supposed to act, right? I mean, we see this in China, we see this in North Korea, we see this to a lesser degree in Western countries, but it's there, but it's when it becomes oppressive, and it's just like, Jesus Christ.
right.
That's what we got to push back against.
Absolutely. And it can be very disheartening as a single person to figure out what can I do when there's not a network of established community individuals collaborating, because none of us has the ultimate answer to everything, but each of us will have a piece of the puzzle that could
Yep.
potentially fix the things that are going wrong here. Um,
Sure.
and it's neat, I think, when we can initiate a dialogue about cult recovery and cult abuse and mind control and coercive control, not from the perspective of figuring out just how did this happen to us and how did we get victimized? But also, how can we ensure that this stops and that the predators are easily recognizable for what they are, so people don't have to spiral into, I think, the guilt trap that makes them think, well, hurt people hurt people. So if that person hurt me, he must have been hurt. And then rather than pull ourselves out of the role of the victim, we're trying to save the one who's a predator. And that's something
Oh
that,
yeah.
and the sympathy for the devil, you know, when you start
Yeah.
relating to the one who's holding you back and holding you down. Um, and I think those of us who have escaped a cult, we have a unique perspective on those who are predators will always be preying on us in a negative way. And we do not have to sympathize for them. If somebody abuses you, that doesn't mean that it's now your job to fix them. It means it's now,
Correct.
yeah.
Correct. Oh, that's such a valuable point.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because it's the number one reason that people, especially domestic situations, why
Yeah.
they will stick
Yeah.
and stick and stick. I'm going to fix him. I'm going to fix her. And it
Yeah.
goes both ways. And it's just nuts. I mean, it's really, no, get out, get away. It's not your job to
No.
fix anyone.
No.
It's your job to navigate your life. And if somebody's tearing it apart, get the hell away from them.
Yeah.
This is now being put into law in some places in the world under coercive control laws.
Yeah.
We are seeing some controls being put in place. This is started in the United Kingdom. There are states in the United States that are putting this into place. I know New South Wales and Australia recently established a coercive control law. This is all in the area of domestic abuse and domestic violence, but it's where the term coercive control was actually born, was in that sphere. And we're bringing it over into the cult world because it's the same behavior. So we hope that now that these laws are just starting to take effect in these areas, we can see over time, we can start dragging this over into the cult realm also.
Yes.
Because people are starting to go to jail for this. They're getting taken in by the police, and they're seeing that it's not okay to engage in a repeating pattern of abusive behavior with your spouse or your partner.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even have to be physical abuse. I mean, we're talking about financial control and social control, and you can't see your friends, and you can't go out, and you can't have the checkbook, and you can't have a car. And, they're controlling their partner's life.
Right.
That's illegal in these places now.
That's music to my ears, Chris, because I haven't been looking this stuff up necessarily, but it's been bugging me.
Yeah, this is happening. New Jersey has laws about this. I think Hawaii, California are enacting laws on this. So it's state by state. There's no federal mandate on this here in the United States, but it's gathering steam. And there might be other countries, even in the European Union, that I'm not aware of that are also going in this direction. But watch coercive control. That's the term that this is being pushed under. And I'm very hopeful that this is going to keep rolling forward.
I don't see it stopping at this point because, once we have a scientific measurement system in place to identify coercive control, which I think is fairly easy to do, does the victim have the right to say yes, no, maybe, I don't know, let's find out, about their own self? Yes or no? If somebody doesn't have the right to explore the pursuits that interest them, whether it's creative or sports or recreational, as you mentioned, if an individual feels like the other person is always right, whether or not they feel that the other person is always right, then that's coercive control taking place. And
probably so. That's right.
Yeah. So I think
and it's actually described in the laws. It's not a wholly subjective opinion-based thing. You can document it. You can see it, right? When somebody's controlling your finances, you can show that. When somebody's not, controlling your social media accounts, demanding access to all your messages, right? Peering in on your life, tearing down your privacy.
Yeah.
tearing down your boundaries like we went over. These are documentable things. These are evidence-based things. You know, you can build a case around this kind of thing. And
Yeah.
it's been done and
Yeah.
it's being done. So so like I said, I think this is only going to keep rolling forward.
True. And I think another thing in my own life that looking back, I could have done differently in order to lift myself out of the victim paradigm differently, um,
Mhm.
is that when that kind of toxic manipulation is happening, it would have been really beneficial for me to know that it's okay to feel negative sometimes, because
Oh
we've been
yeah.
used with what they're now calling toxic positivity. Like,
Yes.
if you're feeling badly, look within yourself and see how you can see reality differently. As opposed to, if somebody is abusing you, get away from them. So a lot of victims will think, how did I call this negative experience in? I must have done something. And so instead of standing up to the bully, putting up the boundary, going to the authorities for help, recording what's happening so that there's proof of it, instead that person internalizes, because a lot of the predators will say, hey, you're being negative. Is this how you want our relationship to be? And
Yeah.
them is gaslit. That's gaslighting.
Oh
Um,
yeah. And especially when, and let's be clear, it's a repeating pattern of behavior, right? That's what you're really looking for with this, because anybody can have a bad day. And I know I'm talking about physical abuse or something. I mean, there's no excuse for that ever, but anybody can have a bad day, have a bad argument, have a bad week, whatever. But when you have a repeating pattern of behavior where you're constantly being belittled,
yeah,
invalidated, told you're less, controlled, can't leave the house even, this kind of nonsense. That's in the domestic sphere. Over in the cult sphere, you have, the us versus them. You have, people telling you can't take, you got to come down to the group on the holidays. You got to come down all day, not just for an hour, right? This kind of crap, right? You didn't chant enough. You didn't pray enough. You didn't audit enough. Whatever it is you didn't do, you didn't do it enough.
you didn't
And
do
you
it.
haven't given us enough money either, by the way, right? This
Yeah.
kind of whole, this whole thing.
And how
When
dare
that
you
kind
sleep
of
last night? We told you to stay up working.
exactly. So when we kind of know what we're talking about here with this stuff. I mean, everybody kind of knows what we're talking about. When these things are happening, though, it can be real hard to bridge that belief gap, that it's actually happening to you.
Right.
We can see it in other people so much more quickly than we can see it happening to ourselves. But
True.
but if it's happening, it's happening, and you can't ever grow, change, get out of it, improve your condition until you acknowledge those things, right? And trying to put a happy face, as you mentioned, toxic positivity, trying to put a happy spin on everything. Well, I'm an optimist, and everything's going to be just fine.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's not, and
exactly.
sometimes you got to get out of that situation.
Absolutely. And I think it's good to be an informed optimist if you see that you can get
Yeah,
yourself out of negativity. But if you're a blind faith type of optimist who's always waiting for someone to come rescue you, that is basically signing your own sentence to being doomed.
that's
So,
right.
you
That's
know,
right. I mean, it was the day I realized nobody was coming to save me that I got out of Scientology. It only took me 27 years to figure it out. But I'll tell you, it was a real big moment. It was like, oh my God, they're going to keep using me till the end of my life. If I'm
yeah,
going to, if this situation's going to change, I have to change it because they're never going to. They
yeah,
are perfectly happy to
yeah.
use my labor for the rest of my life and martyr me. What do they care?
What do they care?
You know,
They don't.
Chris gave his all. Isn't he so wonderful? You
Yeah.
know, that no, you got to pull the plug. You've got to have the drive and I know it's, at that moment, I believe me, I lived it. I know how hard it is.
Mhm.
Um, but it takes guts, it takes courage, and it takes integrity, to know who you are, know what you're about, and decide that that's important.
Totally. What advice do you think you'd have for people who are in, maybe they suspect they're in a cult, or maybe they're being controlled in a relationship? Like you said, it only took you 27 years, but I think you were one of the groundbreakers as far as escaping cults go. in those 27 years, you gathered quite a bit of intel on how Scientology operates, and that's probably been
True.
something that's helped you pull a lot of others out, like
Mm,
50 and of people who listen to our interviews, and a lot of people from Scientology and Mormonism who I've spoken to have watched your videos, and it's been helpful for them to get out of that paradigm.
yep. Yep.
What would
That's
you
right.
say to somebody if they're feeling fear because they feel the people around them are controlling them and it's negative, and they're scared that if they do stand up for themselves, set a boundary, or try to escape, something bad might happen, like they might get fair gamed, or they might get, even worse, actually physically assaulted, which happens in India to cult survivors and other parts.
Right. Yeah, getting yourself into a safe space with a support network of people who will watch over or who will help you
Yeah.
is usually the most important first step of getting out. One of the reasons it took me so long is because I didn't even think about or even try to put any kind of a support system in place for myself, and I couldn't have left on my own. I needed help, and unfortunately for me, I got it from my parents,
Yeah.
who had actually gotten me into it in the first place. So it
Ironic.
was odd that they
Yeah.
then helped get me out, and good on them for doing so. Um, there are government programs, there are private institutions, there are NGOs. There's a lot of groups out there with a lot of interest in trying to help people out of bad situations, domestically and cult situations. I mean, Scientology wise, for example, you have a group called the Aftermath Foundation. They'll literally, it's a roll your own support network for people to get out of Scientology. They'll get you a house, not a house, but a place to stay, job, car. Like they'll really help you with those things.
Wow, that's wonderful.
It's it's tremendous. I mean, I wish it had existed when I left
Yes.
Scientology. It was formed afterwards, and it's exactly what people need. We need a lot more work by a lot more volunteers out there putting things like that together to support people rather than persecute them when they leave these groups or leave them out on the street and this kind of thing. And of course the physical abuse, when you have a societal problem like that, it's I start kind of losing the words because it's like, Jesus, how the hell do you just get out of the country? I mean, I don't even know what to say. This is horrible.
Yeah.
Um, I know no matter who we're talking about, or no matter what the situation is, whether there's physical, financial, or emotional or sexual abuse, or a mixture of all of the above, none of this is easy for people. None of it is.
No.
Um, the only thing that I can say, having lived it and having helped a lot of people through it, is there is another side. There is a happier place that you can get to, and even the journey to get there is better than continuing to live with the slave collar on.
Absolutely. That's a huge
Right.
point that I think um, everyone needs to understand. It's better to be in a place where you're a little bit nervous and uncertain, but you're being your true self, rather than in a place where every waking moment of your life is terrible, but you feel safe because everyone has told you this is a good thing.
That's right.
So
That's
yeah,
right.
it's tough for people to have the willingness to admit that what they planned, what they built up for themselves, what they felt was their identity is no longer correct. And so that's where we
Huge.
see people who really want to fight their growth will double down and get toxically angry and irritated at anyone who's trying to help them out. And that's where you see cult members retaliating against whistleblowers, or,
That's right.
activists being abused by industries against which they are active, and to try to bring us down, or to bring them down, not try.
That's
Um,
right.
but yeah, it's very, very important, like you said, to have networks of support established so that nobody feels like they're on their own when it's time to
Exactly.
take that break. And this is where I feel governments need to step in. So I'm happy to hear that the criminalization of coercive control has started in New South Wales and certain states within the US and some places in Europe.
Yep.
But it's time, I think, for those who create the laws to stop using the law as a way to keep people in bondage, and instead start using the law to punish the predators and help the victims. Because
That's right.
as long as we have these stupid notions like somebody is, and I'm sorry to say this might be very controversial, but in human world, somebody is innocent until proven guilty. But in reality, somebody is guilty when they commit the crime and innocent when they do not. And we are locked in a system where lawyers can represent guilty clients and earn huge commissions from their trials by basically selling their soul to something negative and using their skills of argument and understanding of the law against goodness. And it's
Right.
happened to a point where I feel criminal defense lawyers should be obligated, if they know their client is guilty, to say so. Like, no lawyer should have to take money to prove that somebody is innocent when they're guilty. That's a crime. And this should also be something somehow implemented in law that, we have enough ways to gather evidence at this point, thanks to, ironically, the very thing that people are afraid of, which is computers monitoring us, cell phones, cameras, microphones. However, when you know you're right about something and you know that you have the evidence of that thanks to whatever gadgets happen to be around, I think that is a way that we can push the judiciary into, maybe not push, but evolve the judiciary beyond a matrix system set to keep people fighting, into a system where we can easily identify who's the perpetrator and who's the innocent one and see justice. And then the jury trials and the judges are more for the gray areas where somebody did something wrong, but maybe there was an underlying issue that led to it. Maybe they're guilty now. Maybe they want to look in and change. That's where I think plea bargains or maybe reduced sentences could come in. But when somebody has committed, for example, murder, or the crime of consciousness against individuals by deliberately, say, inventing a product that they made simply to hurt others, or mandating something in the education system, say putting something into the curriculum to lock and restrict the development of children's brains and stuff like that. Those things need to be considered crimes too. And the fact that the court system prioritizes corporations and corporate interest and entities over individuals. One of the reasons cults get away with what they do is that systems that value money over consciousness will value a big group of people with lots of money, like the Bronfman's money that Keith Raymond used, or the Silicon Valley money that Nityananda used. When we can see individuals using their skills against humanity, that is a crime now. And that's what I'm waiting to hear come from the politicians, because they're all, those of them who have been enabling the negativity are criminals, and it's time for them to be replaced. But,
Sure.
the new reality come into existence is something that I think can give all of us a little bit of purpose and a little bit of maybe excitement and cooperation, and that is what's going to build the community that you very rightly said is essential for an individual to thrive.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I would certainly like to see an end to the two-tier justice system that exists in our countries, in terms of, when you have money, there's a certain level of justice available to you that is not available to the rest of us.
Yeah.
And I do find that to be, for myself, the big divide in this. And I don't want that to be true. I wish it weren't. I like to be more optimistic. I consider myself that way most of the time, but that is a big divide, and it's become abundantly clear in recent court cases just how big that divide is. And I think that's something that we need to resolve, or we're probably not going to have a justice system for a lot longer, the way things are going. And I that's doom speak that I don't like saying, right? I don't want that.
No.
I think it can be changed. I think we can do something about these things. I think we have systems that allow for change,
Yeah.
but we have to get people who aren't corrupt and
Exactly.
aren't predatory
Yeah.
in charge of them, and unfortunately that's politics attracts
Yeah.
predators like,
Like
moth to a
religion does.
flame.
Yeah, it's true.
It's true. This
Politics,
is,
religions,
yep,
institutions of any sort of authority attract the people who want to pray because they need that legalized validation that allows them to assert their will as being bigger, better, more important than individuals'
yeah,
will. Because no individual's will is bigger, better, or more important than any other individual's will. And
yep,
so it's pretty sickening when we start to think about it that the things that are wrong with the world are often blamed on individuals. Like you'll hear people in the government say there's not enough resources on this perfectly abundant planet to feed everybody who's alive. And then they have so-called food industries that produce and destroy any extra if they don't feel like they can sell all of what they've made. So how dare they tell us that there's not enough food to feed everybody when they incinerate the food that doesn't sell before it expires at grocery stores instead of giving it to shelters or shipping it to countries that do need it.
that's
We've
right.
been lied to for long enough. And I think when people start to see it, they can't unsee it. And that's when you're able to identify, I think, who's the predators in your life and who are the people who are here looking for solutions and trying to help.
That's
Um,
right.
it's
That's
tough,
right.
though, I think, when coming out of the cult fog to be able to be clear about things like that. So,
Very,
yeah,
very. And that's why I think that, we're talking big picture issues here right now, but I think when it comes to cult recovery and to what the individual man, woman, whatever, coming out of these situations, you got to pull the flippers way back in, because a lot, not all by a long shot, but a lot of cults are all about, cosmic consciousness and big picture stuff and making you feel like you're just, part of this machine that is, absolutely changing the world, changing the situations, or aspiring you to achieve your best, perfect, most potential self, and this kind of ego driven stuff. We tend to go in the cult mindset into this very delusory, very big, wide image of ourselves, and our egos get way outsized. That by design, we're sort of pushed that way. And it's part of the reason that people stick for so long is because it feels so good to be part of this. I feel
it
so
does.
special.
We're
I
all
feel
in this
so
together to
unique.
make the world better.
That's right. That's right. And on top of it, you get to feel like you're better than everybody else because look at all the good work you're doing,
Right?
all these things we
Yeah.
fed ourselves when we were in the cult, right? And I really feel that there's a real hard sort of, slice of humble pie you really got to eat. You really got to take it down, and it's going to choke. It's going to be hard, but you gotta reduce back down to just little simple you.
Yeah.
Just before you got in the cult, how'd you think of yourself? Just little
Yeah.
old you,
Yeah.
and you're just you,
Yeah.
right? And it's okay that you're just you, because that's the reality of it. Is you're not the planet. You are you. so
Yeah.
so I think that we can also tend to try to take on, more than we can deal with or more than we can chew or whatever out of that bad habit of the cult thinking. And it takes some time to kind of come back down to earth.
Yeah.
And I think that this is a very important part of the process, is to do that so that you can then get your shit together, basically get yourself back in order, and then figure out, okay, now how do I relate to the rest of the world? It's not going to take years. I'm not talking about some go find yourself journey. I just mean lose the cult ego
Right.
and the cult megalomania.
Exactly. Exactly. The cult
Right?
megalomania. And it's the most ironic thing, Chris, because when you are just little old me, you can achieve amazing things because
Yes.
you're doing the things you want to do. But when you're this big, grandiose cult member working towards making some huge thing happen, you're just a hamster on a spinning wheel being told, keep running, because you're making this world
That's
great
right.
again. And you're running and running and you're running, but nothing's changing.
Exactly.
Sometimes
Exactly. I use that exact analogy. I've said it's the hamster wheel to nowhere.
that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
So
people want to stay on that hamster wheel because they said somebody told me that if I keep doing this, something really great is going to happen. And I've been at it for 70 years. And if I stop now, I'm going to die without achieving my goal. And
that's right.
ironically, right?
That's
Ironically,
right.
you have to let go and stop and say, wait, what has this achieved so far? Did I enjoy it? Does it feel good to me that this is what I'm doing? Not does it feel good to me that a leader says I'm doing it for a higher goal, but does the action you're taking actually feel like the right action you want to take? And there were decisions I made when I was in Nityananda's cult that I very clearly overrode my inner moral compass to make those decisions. And a lot of times we think the moral compass has to do with what we tolerate happening to others. I would never tolerate people being hurt, animals being hurt, nature being ripped off. But I would tolerate myself being put down, myself being yelled at, myself being abused, because
Right.
I didn't think I mattered in the greater scheme of things. And I think for individuals to understand the responsibilities we have in the world, it helps to know that it's not any one person's job to save everyone else. It's each individual's job to save themselves. And
That's it.
yeah,
That's it. You got it. Because you can't.
no,
You kind of have to come to a place where you realize the world doesn't want to be saved, doesn't need to be saved. World ain't going anywhere,
no.
right? As George Carlin used to say, right? The
Yeah,
world's
we're
not going
like,
anywhere. Planet's not going anywhere. We are.
yes, exactly.
and it, and nobody else is your 100% responsibility. They're their responsibility, right?
Absolutely.
You own you. That's who you have to take charge of.
Yes. I really love, I don't know if you listened to her, but Mayim Bialik, who played, well, you know who Mayim Bialik is, I guess. Jeopardy host, Big
Oh
Bang.
yeah. Oh yeah, she's great.
She has a podcast called Mayim Bialik's Breakdown. And she interviewed, I almost said Raj Kutrapali, but no, she interviewed Kunal Nayar. And he had a really powerful point where he said that in life, he always looked at enlightenment as his ultimate goal. And one day he was sitting meditating in a park and there were kids playing in the distance. And he had this realization that whether he is enlightened or not, those kids will be playing in the park. And suddenly it was just this breakthrough that allowed him to let go of the goal and be in the journey or be in the moment and be in the now. And
Right.
I don't even like the terminology like it's a journey, not a goal, because as soon as you think it's a journey, it's still a thing. It's not a
Mm,
journey or a goal. It's just it's isness. When you just relax into what is, suddenly you can see what was, what's going to be, what could be, what should be, what you want to do. But you have to be in the now to be in that operating room of your own operations.
sure.
Operating room is the wrong word. I'm not talking surgically, but you have to be you have to be in your own control center. And your control center happens when you let go of this idea that you're supposed to be something. And instead you embrace, what do I want to do? And start figuring out how. And that's
That's right.
very difficult in life if you're constantly conditioned with things like um, people telling you stupidity when instead of saying they don't know something, they just admit that they don't know it.
That's
Um,
right.
so yeah, I think the work that you do has really helped me in my life to look at where I've been misled. What do I need to hold on to? What do I need to let go of? What do I need to be a believer in, and what do I need to be more an experimental? Sorry, I saw something. I think there's an ant in my hair. I just I caught movement at the corner. I'll just kind of push that aside.
Okay, cool.
Um, oh, there was. Yeah, there it is. He's on my finger now. See?
You got him.
That's funny. I don't know where that little guy came from, but
Oh, that's funny.
yeah, I'll just see if I can get him aside there.
There you
There he is. Anyhow, I forget what I was saying.
go. You were talking about learning things and growing.
Right, right, right. It's hard to realize who we are in the present moment if we're constantly trying to be what other people tell us to be.
Good point.
Thank you.
Good point. Yes, that's exactly right. And that's actually the core right there of the basic problem with being in a cult,
Yeah, exactly.
you know?
Um, so yeah, I think the work that you've done has been a lot of research and development into how cults affect people long term. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really wonderful that you've stuck at it and kept going
Thank
with
you.
the exposure of Scientology. Oh, it's just true because it's not right that after everything all of you have done, for example, to prove that Shelley Miscavige is missing and in desperate need of intervention.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the post. I don't know if it was on your page or maybe it was Tony's, but somebody had
Mm.
posted a picture of a Scientology building where someone put a help me sign in the window. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was down in LA. Yeah.
police were called, but they didn't do anything because then the help sign was taken out of the window again. I
Mm-hmm.
think it should be absolutely mandatory that if police are called, they answer not to the corporation on whom they are called, but to the victim for whom they are called. And
Sure.
that's how we can see which individuals in the police are predators and which are here to actually do good. Um, so I think there's a lot of things that have happened that have proven it's an old, outgrown negative pattern on this planet that a victim
Mm,
is solely responsible to prove the crime that was committed. It should
mm.
be the perpetrator, it should be up to the police to prove it, not the victim. Like, why did Leah have to do all, or Leah? I always call her Leah, but I don't know if I'm saying it right or not because
Leah. Yeah. Leah.
I've heard her say again and again and again. She's gone to the police, she's submitted reports, she's interviewed however many victims she has, hundreds. She's done
Mm,
all the intel. She's had a lot of help. A lot of other people have looked into it too. Scientology is negative, it's predatory.
yep.
How is it still allowed to exist? And why does it still have a religious status? I think they should criminalize having anybody get a religious status because being one religion or another does not make your organization worthy or unworthy of the same fair treatment everyone else gets. And so
Mm,
that to me would be another really good step in the direction of preventing coercive control from continuing to rule and plague people's lives because I'm not against people believing in their religious beliefs. They can have that if it feels helpful to them, and that's for an individual to choose. But if their religion is given a tax exempt status or a special status where crimes are ignored because their religion looks into crimes itself. So for example, in Catholicism, how many negative things were done to altar servers and
yeah. No, that's true.
so
True.
how is it fair that they're allowed to have a governmental existence as a nation state, the Vatican, when clearly they are being used in a predatory way? It's run by a predator, it's being used by predators. How is
It's
it?
a it's a tough call. These are the complicated questions that drive our societies forward as societies, because this has been a question for centuries. You know, is where does the line get drawn between sensible or socially acceptable religious practice and criminal behavior, or what happens when criminals enter into a religious setting or a situation and take advantage, right? Because we can certainly say that, well, you know, we can't say every single priest or every single
No,
person
no,
in
no, I'm not saying
Catholicism
that.
is,
Yeah,
oh,
not all.
I wasn't even,
No,
yeah, and
no,
I know you're not. I just know it's that
yeah,
this is the problem, is like, but who is?
yeah.
Which one of them are the problems, right? And how do we deal with this? And do we judge the whole by the awful, or do we judge it by the greater majority of people who aren't the awful, or how do we figure this out? And
Right.
it's just, and this is the thing that keeps the wheels turning all night long as we try to
True.
figure out how to navigate these problems,
Yeah.
because they're big problems. We want freedom of religion and expression.
Yeah.
um, People are going to believe what they're going to believe regardless of what the government has to say about it. So we have a freedom of belief inherently within us, but our ability to express those beliefs and express through our actions, the meaningfulness of our beliefs, this is important for human beings. And it's always that shifting line in the sand of what's harmful, what's beneficial,
Right. Right.
ah, tough questions.
Tough questions, but I think individual solutions, because when we can understand who's a predator in our circle, I trust that those who are well intentioned in government and in law, in any strata of society, they can tell if they have an idea. So for example, when my mother was a teacher, she had a conference that she went to in which they were discussing the curriculum for 12th grade prep for graduation ceremonies and such. And they were talking about what is essential for a 12th grade student to know before that student is sent off to university. And it had to do with, mathematic formulas, political stuff, all that stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the meeting, everyone was kind of wrapping it up. And my mom kind of raised her hand and said, "Excuse me, how about quality of life and individual happiness? Like, can we also put on the table, how do we prepare our students to find happiness in what they do instead of feeling like they just have to strive to earn money to pay their bills and to live on that hamster wheel?" And she said the
Mm.
other teachers looked at her like she was crazy because it's a concept that hasn't been introduced to educators. And she thought that was crazy because it is crazy. It's crazy that school, which ideally is established to allow individuals to become actualized expressions of who they want to be. Instead, it's being used to make them fit into the mold of humanity. Sorry, that little ant is crawling all over me again.
Okay, no problem.
That's funny.
Oh my gosh. I'm gonna have to wrap up shortly,
Oh, no
by the
problem.
way.
That's
Okay, cool.
okay.
Just I didn't realize what time it is. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah. But no, good
Sorry.
good talk. That's okay. No, I was just kind of excited to hear your perspectives on the world and maybe how what
Sure.
you observed in the cult realm has to do with society on a greater scale. And I think it was a good talk.
I think so. I think we've had a great talk. Yeah, I haven't had any problem with anything we talked about.
No, thank you so much, Chris. Was there anything else you think you'd like to share? I see you've got your book there, Scientology A to Z News.
Yes. Yes, I do. Yes, I wrote this book some time ago, and it's a breakdown of Scientology. And if you're curious about that topic, it's not my memoir. This is an actual breakdown of Scientology. So if you're curious about what it is,
Yeah.
you can buy my book on Amazon.
Cool.
And I've got, something on the order of about 1,500 videos on my channel, which is this incredible library of knowledge on cult recovery and cult anatomy and what coercive control is. And I use a ton of Scientology examples, but I've also interviewed, former Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses and Moonies and and people from other groups and cults. And it's just been a lot of fun over the last 10 years, learning the whole breadth of this field and how wild people's beliefs can get, and
It's
what it
pretty
can drive them
wild,
to
isn't
do.
it? Yeah.
Oh, wild stuff. Wild
Wow.
stuff. So endlessly fascinating, and probably will be my life's work.
It's good life's work. And I think it's important probably for a lot of people to get your book to understand Scientology, because I see L. Ron Hubbard as somebody who had been prepared by negative predatory powers to establish a system by which people could really truly be controlled. And other cult leaders are following that same formula. So even
Yep.
people who were stuck under a different leadership of negativity can be very benefited to see who wrote the script of that leadership policy that kept them confined.
Oh, perfect. That's exactly right. And yeah, and it's all there for you. So yeah, you can get my book on Amazon and all of that. And you can check out my channel.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Chris, and hi to your lovely wife. And
Thank you. I will pass that on.
And the cats, I think you have one cat.
A dog now.
Oh, a dog now. Okay, then love to the puppy dog.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And of course, well wishes to you and yours as well.
Thank you so much, Chris. It was a pleasure. And yeah, maybe if anyone has any questions for you, they can leave them in the comments and we might do a part 2 someday.
Absolutely. I'm always around.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chris. Have a great one.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah.
A pleasure. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
All right. And meeting for